Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 7 p.m. on the 19th of August, 2021, and we do have a quorum. All right, can we have roll call, please?
Yes, we can. Sorry about that. Okay. Chair Dorsey?
Present.
Vice Chair Thornton is not here this evening. Diane Foster?
Here.
Mike Smith?
Here.
Chair Chris West is absent. And Lori Zwingli?
Here.
We have some newcomers tonight. Welcome to you all. Marie Schaap?
Yep.
Is that how do you pronounce that?
That's good. Yep, that's good.
Okay. Mike Meyer, I don't see him yet. And Mike Schultz.
Here.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Wonderful. So the first item is approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes or any additions you would like to make? These are for the prior minutes, our prior meeting minutes.
I want to tell you I'm not taking over for Bob, but I actually did read the minutes. I found nothing that was incorrect, so I would move that they're accepted as presented.
Wonderful. Do I hear a second?
Mike Meyer
is now joining.
So moved. And I'll Angie get over to sign those tomorrow. All right.
I can also send it to you via email as well, too.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Wonderful. So our next item is board member announcement, and I'll take this opportunity to announce our new board members so they can get an opportunity if they have some input they would like to speak during this time. We had 7 applicants for the 3 positions we had open on the board, and I'd like to announce 2 of them are here with us tonight, our 2 newest board members. The first one being Mr. Michael Schultz. You could raise Michael. Woohoo! We're glad to have you join us.
Thank you.
And then the other who is present as well, Miss Marie Schaap. And I want to make sure I pronounce that right.
German, Schaap.
Yeah, there we go. Well, welcome.
And Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but Mike Meyer is with us. He just joined a moment ago.
Yeah, I'm here on audio.
There we go. How are you, Mike? Also, our third newest board member, Mr. Mike Myers. Welcome.
Thank you.
Meyer, without the S.
Without the S, correct.
All right. Now we'll go around with board member announcement. It's just an opportunity to speak to anything that we've observed or have heard during the week, or may want to put on a future agenda. So we will start out with Mike Smith. Do you have anything for us tonight?
I'm just happy to be here. I just got back from a rafting trip through the Grand Canyon on the Colorado River. One of those once-in-a-lifetime things that I will never, ever, ever do again. But it was great. So I'm happy to be back with you all.
If the river keeps receding like it's going, you're right. You may never do it again.
yeah. I'll be hiking the next time.
Yeah. Wonderful. Diane, do you have anything for us?
Nothing for me at this time. Maybe just when we kind of go around, if each of the new members can do a little introduction and tell a little about themselves, that'd be really awesome.
Perfect. All right, we will do that for sure. Lori.
I don't really have anything to add either. Like Mike, I just got back from vacation as well, except I went to Mexico. First time ever there, so I had a blast.
Oh, love Mexico. All right, and Chris is not with us. Okay, so we'll jump into our newbies. Marie, if you would like to just take a minute to talk a little bit about yourself and your tenure here in Sherwood.
Sure. So Marie Schaap, I have lived in Sherwood since I was born. Short stint, went to college, left a little bit, but have spent most of my life in the lovely city of Sherwood. My daughter always makes fun of me because I went to Hopkins, Sherwood Middle School, and the high school, the real OG time frame. My husband is a Beaverton police officer, so I have a little bit of a perspective when it comes to being the spouse of a police officer. So that was one of the reasons I chose to sign on to interview for the board. So I'm super excited. I'm also a early morning runner. And so for those police officers that I wave at in the morning, thank you for keeping us safe. And I have some needs of lights, and I almost got hit twice on Sunset and Pinehurst. We need to fix that stop sign because people don't stop. Anyway, that's all.
Oh, Chief, I see someone for the Traffic Safety Committee. I'm just saying.
Second.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will. I can tell you that the Sunset and Pinehurst is a frequent target and stopping point. So I will pass that along, and I'm sure there'll be more attention. As far as the lighting goes, we can pass that to the Traffic Safety Committee and city staff and have that looked at. So we'll circle back with you to get more details and maybe have you fill out a request form.
It's an interesting intersection. The other day, a lady literally was going, I'm going to guess 50 miles per hour. And I was in the middle of the crosswalk with my dog, and I just watched her just drive. I was like, oh, okay, there's a stop sign. But, anyway.
Forget the stop sign. How do you miss those dogs?
Yeah, right? And I had my blinky lights. It was 7:00 in the morning. I mean, there was no way you didn't see me in the middle of the, but that's all right. We'll chalk it up to a bad day. She had a bad day.
Well, you're in the right place, Marie. Take action on that. And what about Mr. Schultz? Mike, you have anything for us, and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys. I've lived in the city of Sherwood for 14 years. I grew up and was raised in Hillsborough and graduated from Hillsborough High School, so not too far away. But my wife and I moved here when we first started our family in hopes of having a good, safe place to raise our kids and a good school system. So far we've been very happy. We've stayed here for 14 years. So I'm a firefighter with the city of Portland. I've been there for almost 22 years now. So, I work with police officers on a daily basis while I'm at work, and I'm interested in public safety as a whole, but also I'm interested in the things that police do and the hard work that they put in to keep us safe. And my main motivation for applying for this position was just to be a supporter, but also somebody that can, look at the big picture and make sure that the department's going in the direction that, the citizens want. And I wouldn't have one bad thing to say about them. Every interaction I've ever had with them has been great, and I'm excited to be able to be a part of that. So thanks again for having me, and I'll probably be kind of quiet the first couple meetings here. I want to make sure I get my bearings before I have too much input but I'm looking forward to being a part of this team and helping shape the way public safety looks in Sherwood. So thank you.
You are very welcome. Thank you. And now Mr. Mike Meyer. Hey there.
Hey there. Yes, I'm right here. So our family's lived in the city of Sherwood going on 13 years now. I grew up in Banks, Oregon, graduated from Banks High School back when Banks and Sherwood were in the same conference when we were 2A. And so I used to come out here a lot for athletics back in the day. I grew up on a farm there in Banks. Spent about 6 years in the military and been in IT since since then, I'm a tech guy. We also, wife and I, we own Generations Bar and Grill here in Sherwood. If you've been there, so my wife runs it. That's her thing. I have a day job elsewhere as a technologist. My motivation for joining the advisory board was, honestly, I want to give back to the community as much as I can. I love this town. I love living here. The schools are fantastic. I have one child left in school, a sophomore at the high school, and I just like I said, want to give back and support the police department for as much as I can. My interactions with them, like for example, at our sports pub, we've had a few times where we've had break-ins or what have you, and the Sherwood Police Department has always been the most supportive organization that I could ever hope to deal with. So, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Glad you're here with us. And as for myself, just to keep things moving, I don't have anything at this time. We will move on to our next item of business, and I sort of moved ahead with the introduction of the new board members. We're going to move on now to the traffic safety update. So, Marie, this is where you'll want to listen closely. Diane and Lori, do you have anything for us?
I think the last meeting that we held was actually Chris and my's last meeting. Yeah.
Correct. Lori and I have yet to, next week will be our first meeting.
Yeah, and I don't remember much about that meeting because both Chris and I were drinking champagne, just knowing we were off, so yeah. No, actually, I dug the minutes out of that, or the notes out of that. So we actually talked about 3 items, all of which were referred back to city staff for further review. One, excuse me, was with respect. Remember when Brookman was closed down because of all the construction going on? Everybody converted onto Old Highway 99, and there were some issues with speeding and whether one of the intersections there needed a stop sign, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been referred on to the city for some analysis on that aspect. Don't know. With all the stuff that's been referred back to the staff, I have no idea what's happened with it since then. But the second one we talked about was some issues with parking off of Woodhaven Drive and Hosler Way. Cars parking just on both sides of the street, so there was no space for, or very hard to get out of those intersections, very poor visibility. So staff is looking at that in terms of how wide is the street, can emergency vehicles get through there, et cetera, et cetera. So that was still in process. The last one was on the entrance to the senior center and the sidewalk there. Excuse me, there was an issue whether there were truncated domes that would assist disabled folks know where the sidewalks were. So city staff is reviewing that. So Diane and Lori, I dump all of that on to you now. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Diane and Lori, for stepping into that role. And
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but I want to add to Mike's report. So he mentioned that the last meeting was in July. And the reason for that is we, in coordination with the chair of the Traffic Safety Committee, Jason, we canceled the August meeting for a couple of reasons. One, there was no new request that had come on. And so there wasn't anything new that needed to be looked at. Everything was existing workload the staff was in process with. And we also, as it's a new committee, we're continuing to fine tune the process and have discovered that the committee process is a little bit too efficient for staff, meaning that they get requests come in and they move through requests and staff finds themselves looking over a stack of paper, especially during the summer when there's other construction and capital projects that are going on that are not related at all to the work of the Traffic Safety Committee. And so we are working on some procedures, a new form that we're going to introduce to the committee next week, that Captain Carlson's going to introduce, and just kind of explain some, as I said, refinements to the process. Nothing was broken. It was just a matter of, since this is such a new committee, you know, you think you have everything ready to go, and then you just realize that there's improvements that can be made. I'll just give you a quick example. Prior to this work, every request that came in went to the Traffic Safety Committee. And for many of them, we discovered that they really weren't a Traffic Safety Committee issue. Either they were something that had already been identified by staff was maybe even already working on, or they ended up being something that was not within the purview of the Traffic Safety Committee at all. And so we would end up burning the committee's time reviewing those. And so that's just a quick example of one of the things that we're trying to refine. So anybody that wants to see how that's going to play out, you're certainly welcome to tune in to the meeting next week. Otherwise, Diane and Lori can fill you in on whatever happens next week and the work of the committee. So that's kind of where we're at. So I just wanted to add that little piece to that.
Thank you, Chief. Yes. Thank you again, Mike Smith, for your work on that committee. And I know, as Chief said, sometimes it's challenging because everything is related to traffic and safety, even if it's something that's more along the line of code compliance. So making sure that those delineations are clear is important. All right. Our next item of business is counselor news. Hello, Kim.
Hello, welcome to our new board members, Mike, and Marie. And Mike Meyer, we just enjoyed a burger there at Generations just less than 30 minutes ago. I think Ty was enjoying his also.
Thank you.
Or Captain Hamlin. On the city council side, we've narrowed down our city manager search to one candidate, and we are in contract negotiations with that person. So once contract negotiations, we haven't released his name. Sometimes, jurisdictions do, sometimes don't, depending on the situation of the applicant. So once the contract is negotiated and in place, we'd make that announcement. Also on just Tuesday night of this week, we had a really robust work session talking about Sherwood West and any potential UGB expansion. Every 3 years, cities have the opportunity to go to Metro and request a UGB expansion, bringing land into our urban growth boundary. And through that discussion, we don't vote in work sessions, but we gave direction basically to staff that the majority of council wasn't interested in this particular time doing an ask for to bring land in the Sherwood West. That's the side where the new high school is. And the reason being for that is currently we are in a Sherwood relook of the concept plan. So there's been a concept plan that was done about 5 or 6 years ago, and the priorities of council have changed, and for economic development. So we're just wanting to do a relook of that area to make sure we have a housing jobs balance on that side of town. So we have a citizens a CAC, a Citizens Advisory Committee, and a technical advisory committee working on that relook, and that was a grant from Metro to help us do that process. And then staff is also, and city council is working on residential design standards. We're also at the tail end of our comprehensive plan update, adoption, and implementation of all that. And all of those things I just talked about help us to plan for that Sherwood West area. So it just didn't make sense to do an ask right now in this timing. So we'll have another opportunity in 3 years. And my gut feeling is that would probably be a more appropriate time as all this work that we're currently doing will be buttoned up and we'll have an idea on that side of town. So that was all I was going to update on tonight, so unless anybody has any questions.
All right, hearing none, we will move on to our next report which is going to be police activity update. So I'll hand it over to you, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I get on that, I just want to piggyback a little bit on what Councilor Young talked about. It's important for this board, I think, to know that the police department has been engaged in that plan for Sherwood West, that design. All of a sudden, I can't think, concept plan, and we've been able to provide our feedback on that. And I will tell you that I am very happy with the decision that was made. I don't generally wade too deeply into this stuff, but again, for the sake of this board, I think it's important to understand that the new concept plan was from the perspective of public safety, and my perspective, was a whole lot better than the plan we had before, just in terms of the types of impacts it was going to have. But regardless, anything that pops in Sherwood West is going to have a significant impact on public safety. It's just that simple, right? There's going to be that many more acres, that many more people, that many more roads, that many more pieces of infrastructure, buildings, regardless of what they are, that both police and fire now need to take care of and respond to. And so that has an impact. And so I know council's very aware of that, and I know that there's, that's just one piece of the puzzle. But anyway, I just wanted to share with this board that that from the public safety perspective, this is a good place for us to be, because it doesn't force us to make specific staffing plans and decisions simply based on that, which is a very likely potential at some point down the road. So,
and can I just
yes, please,
onto that just real quick, because I know one of our counselors put out a poll on the UGB expansion, and if you hear on social media, people will say no more growth, no more growth. Well, the reality is Sherwood's going to grow, and we could, as a council, say no all we want, but if we don't do our own planning as council, somebody's going to plan it for us, and that's going to be Metro. So we want to make sure that we have a say in what's going to happen on that side of our town. So that's why careful planning, careful consideration of what we want as a community over on that side of town is important.
Thank you both. Yes, and I am on that Sherwood West Relook board or committee, and there's just been great discussion as to what we would like to see, where we'd like to see it, and the impacts that growth is going to have on our communities. And it's a very diverse board, and everyone's been very involved and vocal about what they think certain impacts would be based on where we're putting residences and commercial buildings and what have you. And so there was a lot of discussion going on about it, but I think in the end it's going to make Sherwood a better place. It'll be a bigger place, but in this case, I think bigger can be better if we're, very purposeful and thoughtful in how we go about it. So thank you both.
For a directionally challenged human, Sherwood West is Brookman. Yes, that area.
No, it's out by the new high school.
Okay, okay, gotcha.
99. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Don't tell my husband that I asked that question.
I won't. And this isn't being recorded, so he'll never see it.
As long as he doesn't have a computer, we're good. All right. I will continue on. I'll go ahead and let the chief jump back in here with.
Brief pause on my part. So before I get started, I want to make sure you've probably seen on the screen here, but Captain Ty Hanlon is joining us tonight. And so he may or may not chime in on this report. Certainly a lot of what's in the update I'm going to give you pertains to the part of the department that he oversees, which is part of why I wanted him here. The other reason I wanted him here tonight is that you will see him as much as possible, depending on time off and different things like that. At most of these meetings moving forward, I want him to become very familiar with how the police advisory board operates, and the process, and wants you all to be comfortable with him, and so he can fill in on my absence. And as you know, as we talked about last month, I at this point only have 4 meetings roughly, depending on what happens on the December meeting, left. So it's important that we have somebody that's ready to jump in. Okay, with that, we're going to go through this update. I'm going to share my screen here. And on the agenda, it says police activity, the patrol investigations, hiring process. Well, that's all wrapped into one. So it's all in one presentation here. And so we'll get that zooming. And everybody, my screen is flashing. And there we go. Should be able to, everybody see it now? All right, very good. So hopefully everything will work right. Seems to be so far. So here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to go over kind of where patrol is right now. And this is a 2021 update. Okay, so we're talking about what's gone on up to this point this year. As a part of that, in some sections we'll cover, we'll make some comparisons to previous years, but basically what we're talking about is this year. So we're going to talk about the calls for service, where we're at, kind of a snapshot of where we're at with response times right now, and some highlights of some just a few activities that patrol has dealt with. We're going to show you what investigations is dealing with, and then we'll give you an update on photo enforcement. So we'll start with patrol. So this chart shows you our calls for service. These are just public demands. So again, since we've got some new members, but a reminder for everybody, what we track are the calls that come from the public. We call public demand. So those go through dispatch, either the 911 line or the non-emergency line. We also track proactive activities that are self-initiated activities that the police officers do, but we're not going to talk about those tonight. I just wanted to give you the update on the public demand, because that's really, obviously the word demand, that's what drives the resources we need, and are we able to keep up, and what does it look like over time, and so on and so forth. So you can see there, we're comparing years to give you a snapshot, and 2018, again, another reminder, we talked about this, but that was, as near as I can tell from looking at all the data that I've got, 2018 was the busiest year that we've ever had, certainly in the last probably decade and a half or 2 decades. 2019, it was a little bit less. 2020, the COVID year, right? So COVID had a big impact on the demand and the types of calls we got, or when we got called. And that dip was actually only about 5%, which was less than what I expected and what other agencies experienced. Most places were experiencing closer to a 10% drop in call volume, and we just didn't go that low. And then that last bar is 2021, and you can see that through July, so that's 7 months, we're at just over 3,000 calls for service, which has got us tracking, if we stay on this pace, at another very busy year. That's going to put us right around 6,000 calls, which is, again, going to be right up there with our busiest year ever. So it's pretty safe to say that the COVID impact is over, and we are back to business as usual, if you will. So far, very busy year. Any questions on those numbers there? Okay. So response times, this is kind of an interesting set of data. You can see that 2018 we're well under 4 minutes on priority 1. 2019 we shaved even a little bit more time off than in 2020. We almost went up to almost 5 minutes on average. These are averages, by the way, on priority 1 calls. So the red is priority 1, as you see there in the key. And I honestly don't know why that is. It's become almost habitual to say, "Oh, COVID, oh, COVID, oh, COVID," and I guess that's probably it. I don't know, but then you can see we're down so far this year, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens. The other thing that could be going on is we're getting busier. Although 2018, a really busy year, our response times were a little bit lower. So that's where we're at now. Mike, Smith has a question.
And I apologize, Chief. I was trying to find my unmute button on the last slide, but with the volume of calls, do you track what type of calls they were in terms of, are they domestic disturbance for the most part, or burglaries, or traffic related? Are there types of calls that you track, or is it just a call?
Well, no, we know exactly what they are, and we can go in and pull that specific data. That requires a significant amount more time, right, to break it down like that. And so we don't automatically
is now exiting.
We don't automatically. I think Mike Meyer might be having some connection issues, but we don't automatically do that, but we can do that to look at trends. And so I can tell you, for example, in 2021, this year, the 3137 you're seeing there's a lot of theft, and theft generally tends to be in the top 3. And it's probably definitely number 1 right now. There's just a lot of theft going on. We seem to have reverted back to bygone days where people were committing much more brazen thefts than we've seen in a few years. We've kind of, it seems like we've reverted back to that. And frankly, I don't know why that is, but so that's probably the best answer I can give you is if you're curious beyond that, we'd have to do some more data mining and break them down.
No, that's great. Thanks, Chief.
Okay, I didn't want to advance with my arrow. So any questions on that slide? Okay. So this really kind of gets to what we were just talking about. You can see there so far 56 thefts that are not shoplift related. So those are, the vast majority of those are breaking into cars, probably, among other things. And then you add 31 shoplifting thefts, and the good percentage of those are organized retail theft. And what that means is that it's not somebody that's down on their luck and needs some groceries or needs, some personal items, and they don't have the money and they stuff their pockets, or it's just an individual acting alone and they're not down on the luck, they just want to steal and they do it. What we're talking about here are groups of people that hit multiple stores in multiple locations, and they're organized. I mean, just like the word says. So there may be 2 or 3 of them. There's going to at least be somebody waiting in the car outside. Oftentimes there's going to be two people that go in so that they can kind of create a bit of distraction. They're familiar with how loss prevention works. And so they give them more than one thing to kind of watch, either with the loss prevention officer or with the cameras, either one. And they obviously tend to be pretty proficient at doing this, and they will generally hit, where an individual acting alone may hit for, $50. The organized retail theft folks are going to go in and hit for $200-300. They're going to know exactly what they're taking. Oftentimes they're going to come in after they've broken into some cars, and they're going to use stolen credit cards to buy thousands of dollars worth of gift cards or other things. It's just again, it's become a big problem. 20 hit and runs, which seemed kind of weird to me. I didn't have a chance to talk to Captain Carlson about that, but That seems like an awful lot. So, but I haven't compared to previous years, but we've had them. That stands out. It's a data point that stands out. 13 domestic abuse calls, which is probably about right, maybe a little bit on the low side. 19 DUIs, which again is probably about normal, maybe a little bit on the low side. That those numbers change from year to year. 6 drug offenses, and that's of course none of those include marijuana. And 5 stolen vehicles that have either been taken or recovered. The stealing of cars has become a significant issue. We've not caught up yet with the problem. You may remember if you read it or saw it, but we had a legal issue where it became extremely difficult to prosecute people that stole a car and that we caught inside of a stolen car. The legislature, we lobbied, the Oregon Chiefs Association and others lobbied, and we finally got the fix through this last legislative session, I think it was. So it's going to take a while before that catches up, and eventually it will catch up, and it'll become blatantly obvious to these folks that it's no longer worth it to try to steal cars, because they will in fact go to jail, and or prison. Okay, Brian and then Lori on questions.
All right. My question is twofold. One, does this take into account calls that other cities, departments help us with, like in the evenings when we may have less patrols? And then also, do these account for, are these including calls where our officers may have gone over to help another city as well, like when they come back with their reporting? Are these exclusive to Sherwood?
I think these are exclusive to Sherwood.
Okay.
So normally when we go help another agency, we're not going to be stuck with reports. At least we shouldn't be. So when other agencies come help us, we try to not stick them with reports. So that's pretty common. However, some of these calls absolutely may have involved other agencies. I couldn't tell you which ones. It just depends on how the call plays out, obviously what our resources were at the time. And we're going to go over a couple of highlight calls that absolutely involved other agencies. So that's just really kind of hit and miss and random. It depends on the time, how many people we have on. Is somebody already halfway to the jail with a custody when a big call comes in? If that's the case, then they're certainly going to get help from another agency. And that could, that you could have had help on a couple of those domestic disturbances. It's just hard to say.
All right, thank you.
But it wouldn't change the data point. Lori.
So while I was out of town, the business about the guy getting pulled down from someone's roof in a neighborhood was all over Facebook, and I saw it. And I saw the idea that he had a gun and he tossed it somewhere while he was running into this neighborhood. Are you tracking how many of these calls involve guns? Because that caught my attention. And I'd be really interested in knowing, is that on the uprise or was that a fluke?
Well, first of all, thank you for the nice segue into the next slide. Again, as I said before, we would have to go in and mine the data to find specific weapons calls or calls that involved weapons. And I haven't done that with this data. So I can tell you that while it's not commonplace every day that we're dealing with people that have weapons, it's also not rare or uncommon. I mean, I don't know that it's any worse now than it's ever been, but it just depends on the individual. Thankfully, we probably don't deal with a ton of those in town, but we do on occasion deal with individuals that have weapons. And the call you're talking about there is this last one on the slide we'll talk about. So that's not a very specific answer, but hopefully it addresses what you're wondering. So January, we had a traffic stop that led to the seizure of heroin and meth. And the driver in that case admitted that he was in fact in Sherwood for the specific purpose to sell those drugs. So that we thought that was worth highlighting. It's not uncommon to find heroin and meth. It's far, heroin is far more common than it used to be. Which is unfortunate because it's an extremely dangerous narcotic. And then, of course, our old friend meth, right? So this state has a long history of dealing with meth, and it's kind of made a rebound, unfortunately, in the last several years. So February, we had a domestic disturbance call involving the suspect threatening their spouse with a knife. And then after the person was arrested, they made threats that they were going to find and kill the officer. So as I recall, there was some intoxicating effect on that. Sorry, I'm looking for the right words. So some their mental state was affected by, I think it was alcohol. But nonetheless, a potentially extremely violent call, and made an arrest, and the officer was threatened after that. June, we had a disturbance, not a domestic, but just a disturbance call at a Sherwood grad party. So a family, full knowledge, it was a good party. It wasn't an MIP kind of a deal, but it was a grad party. It had been advertised on social media, which is extremely common. And we had about 20 uninvited folks out of Portland that somebody picked it up on social media, and then they shared it in their own social media channels, and 20 of them showed up, and they were told when they got to the party that, yeah, no, you folks weren't invited, and probably best if you just run along. And some more words were exchanged, and the victim came out and kind of challenged one of the people from the party, and kind of challenged the group, and ended up getting jumped by several of them and pretty significantly assaulted. There was a baseball bat involved. The bat was not used on the victim. However, it was threatened and potentially attempted to be used. So that was a pretty significant call. There was police officers from just about every jurisdiction in Washington County in town on that one, just because of the sheer numbers and the situation. There's a lot to that call that I'm not going to go into, but just suffice to say there was a lot to that call. The officers ended up finding the suspect vehicle. It tried to get away from them. They eventually got it stopped. The people were eventually arrested, but it was an extremely challenging call. And then August, the call that Lori was just referring to, one of our officers was doing proactive policing, drove through the parking lot, and just happened upon a shoplift that was just finishing up, was contacted by some witnesses, loss prevention, that two people had just done a shoplift. They were linked to an associated car. The car was checked. Turns out the car was stolen. These are folks from out of town, the Portland, Vancouver area. They both tried to get away. One was taken into custody fairly quickly. The other one took off, and literally there was an hours-long dog track that involved multiple agencies. Again, probably every agency from Washington County was helping on this one. They tracked him for a while. They lost him. Then people called and said there's somebody in my backyard. So the track was back on again. At some point, the suspect discarded a loaded firearm, which was recovered by the canine, and turned out to be stolen. And then eventually the guy was found on a roof on a house the roof of a house and had his hands in his pockets in kind of a threatening way, and was verbally telling the officers that he had every intention of shooting it out with them. And anybody tried to come on the roof to take him into custody, that he was going to shoot them. And just some absolutely outstanding police work. If you read the post and some of the comments, it's just amazing police work done. And they eventually talked the guy off the roof and took him into custody. He was not armed, but he was certainly threatening and acting as he was. And so fortunately, it had a good ending. And some of the dialogue on Facebook, which is absolutely spot on, is that this could have gone much differently. Somebody's on a roof threatening to shoot police officers. You've already recovered one firearm from him that you believe from him. And now he's threatening to shoot you. It's not a stretch to think that he may have another gun. And this really could have gone bad. And if you just think this through, play this through in your mind, it ends up in a use of force situation. The person maybe gets shot by police. And then he turns out to be unarmed, and everybody says, well, why did you shoot an unarmed person? Well, this would be an example of why the facts have to come out. People can't prejudge. People can't rush to judgment. And this is why we do investigations. And it's difficult sometimes because the investigations take time, but they have to get all the facts out, and so that you find out what the officers were truly dealing with. So, Brian, question.
Yes, actually, my question had to do with mental health calls and if they were also segmented out. So I apologize going back a slide. But if those mental health calls are identified and broken out in terms of how many you get in a given time period.
Yeah, we can track that. I didn't even think about that, but we can certainly track that, and that might be something that Ty can bring back to you. Maybe not next month, but October, because I'm not sure he's going to be here next month. But Ty oversees mental health response team and our interaction with that team, and as some of you may know, we have a South County mental health response team now. So that is a team that's dedicated to Sherwood, Tualatin, Tigard, and King City. So rather than going our own way, we pooled our resources and created some efficiencies, and we've got a multi-agency team dedicated just to South County here. And as I said, Ty's been tracking that and managing that. So that is something that we can get those numbers, and that would actually those would be some good data to share with you. Any other questions? Oh, go ahead. Oh, any other questions on? Well, I did it again. I'm not going to talk until you're done.
That was all. Thank you.
Okay. All right, very good. We'll move on to talking about investigations. And I'm just going to go through this, and then if you have any questions about kind of how this plays out, this is a pretty simple slide. I'm going to let Ty expound on this, but and answer any questions you have. But this is just a snapshot. Keep that in mind. So this was, I said, hey, what do the detectives have right now? And let's put this update together. This is what they have right now. So in a week from now, this could change, right? There could be more, there could be fewer, there could be whatever. But as you can see there, our one detective is working an aggravated theft 1, theft by receiving, a sex abuse 1, a strangulation, encouraging child sexual abuse, theft of mail, assault 3, Dewey, DCS, reckless driving, unlawful use of a weapon. The Dewey is involved a crash and injuries. Then our second detective that focuses more on the person's side is working a first-degree criminal mischief, 9 sex abuses, 3 rapes, an aggravated theft, and an ID theft, 4 physical child abuse cases. And then it's also important to note that the department in total, either detectives or sergeants or patrol officers or whoever, have processed. So what processed means is looked at, touched, investigated, written a report on, but somehow dealt with 86 DHS, that's Department of Human Services. That's what we used to call CSD. That's the Child Welfare Agency for Oregon, cross reports. So by state statute, anytime somebody calls a child abuse hotline or they call a law enforcement agency or somehow there is some other report of possible child abuse, Oregon state law requires that those reports are cross-reported. What that means is if somebody calls the Sherwood Police Department and says, hey, I think a child is or has been abused, we take the report and we must, within 24 hours, notify DHS and vice versa. The child abuse hotline takes a call. They must, within, I think it's ties at 24 hours, or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, generally.
They must notify us. So that's how that cross report. Yeah. And so then every time one of those comes in, they come in through fax most of the time or email. And when they come in, we have to review them and determine if there's action we have to take. So that's what I mean. Somebody has to touch those and do some kind of, no matter how quick or slight, investigation. And many of them turn into a welfare check, where the officers will go check on what's going on. Many of them turn into a full-on investigation. Okay, Mike Smith, question.
Thanks, Chief. I'm not asking for anything specific with what Detective Bertrand's working on, but what in general defines criminal mischief? What's a good example of a criminal mischief crime or whatever?
Well, criminal mischief means damage, intentional damage done to another person's property. So that's the best way to describe it. I can tell you that what I believe, and I'll have Ty confirm, that criminal mischief 1 is a tire slashing. We had somebody that decided to go into a neighborhood and slash multiple victims' tires. So you're talking about several $1,000s worth of damage. I think is that one. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. And we have in fact made an arrest on that. Here's the other thing to keep in mind. I think a layman's perspective would be, oh, you make an arrest and then that case is over. You move on to the next one. Fact of the matter is that's not always the case. And I would say maybe half the time, maybe more, maybe less, depending on the type of cases you're working. Certainly in a child abuse case, you make an arrest, the case is far from over. You continue to put evidence together, get the case ready for prosecution, so on and so forth. And so that's the case there. We've made an arrest in that, but it's still an open case while Detective Bertrand finishes things up. So a lot of these cases may be in multiple different points of investigation. Ty, anything you want to add to any of that?
No, the only clarification I want to make is on the last line of 86 cross reports. I was corrected today. It's actually 94. Not that that is a big difference, but that's just another 8 cases that came through the office that, as the chief alluded to, that we had to touch. And our process is either unfounded or closed at screening, or 24-hour response or 5-day response. And so sometimes when these things come in, and there's several of them, our detectives can be scrambling, and our patrol officers, especially if there's an immediate response that's needed in these cases, because as we are mandated by the state to respond to them, they're important. because these involve our children in our community, and so we take them very seriously. And at 94 for the year, that's pretty significant considering what they entail and the work that's involved in them.
Brian, another question.
Yes. First question, are the welfare checks that are done included in the total number of non-emergency calls that you highlighted in the first slide? Are those welfare checks included in those numbers?
Very likely, yes, they would be.
All right. And then also a question, and maybe Ty, this could be for you. Have we seen an increase in the number of DHS reports, cross reports that you guys are doing since COVID started last year, let's say February of last year, over same time in 2019 and 2018? Have those numbers increased?
Brian, I can't say they have or have not, because I don't think we have any. I mean, we have the data, we didn't compare it. So I will tell you this, that there are a lot of disclosures and cross-reporting that come out of the schools. And the very fact that we had not been in school over the last year or so, these have come through other channels. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we'll probably have an increase as we get back in school, just because there's going to be that accessibility to counselors and other people, and we'll probably be very busy come September.
All right, great answer. I was thinking it would have gone up, but you're right. Without access to first responders, sometimes you don't get to hear those stories until they get into the school. So you're right.
But, and I think I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a fair amount that come through just school counselors,
yeah,
and teachers, all mandatory reporters, and things are disclosed, and that's we get quite a few. That segues into the importance of the SRO and that whole program as well, which is a completely different topic and probably for another night. But anyways.
And I apologize. I meant to say mandatory reporters, not first responders, but you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about
that. And I would say that it's predictable that we would see an increase in the fall. We just do every year. It's just the nature of the timing, and as Ty said. I also want to take a second and just remind everybody, because I certainly don't expect everybody to remember this. I spent 4 years as a detective, and about 75% of what I did was child abuse investigations. I then spent, 2, 3 some years as an investigative sergeant overseeing those that did child abuse investigations, and then before I came to Sherwood, oversaw the support, that part of the Tualatin Police Department. So very, very, unfortunately, very well versed, very experienced in child abuse and how that goes. And it's important for folks to understand that these aren't elective investigations. And what I mean by that is when a report of potential abuse is made, neither DHS nor police officers, police departments, neither of us have the luxury to look at it and say, this just doesn't make sense, it's bogus. Somebody has to look into that. Oftentimes DHS will take the first look. Oftentimes law enforcement will take the first look. And as we just said, there's going to be cross-reporting. But at some point, when there becomes validity to the report, there has to be an investigation by state statute. We don't have a choice. Failure to do so would mean we are violating the law. Much like a domestic disturbance. If we police officers by law in Oregon, if we respond to the scene of a domestic disturbance, which means people living together in some form of relationship, I'll just keep it simple at that. And we determine that a harassment or an assault of some level has occurred, and we can identify the aggressor, we are required to make an arrest. So there's a few things in law that dictate what we will and won't do, and those are two of the biggest. So with respect to child abuse investigations, there's not a whole lot of latitude on there with what we do and don't do. So okay, so on to photo enforcement. Everybody knows that we have a photo enforcement program that we enforce both red lights and speed with. And so I'm going to show you some charts. These are going to be based on intersection. I've given you annual updates on this before, so this isn't anything new. The charts are a little bit different because I've got them broken down by just by intersection now, and it'll have red light and speed both. And this will be again just for 2021, the last 7 months. So this is 99W northbound. So you're coming into Sherwood on our southern border, and you're coming into the intersection at Sunset. The next two slides are going to be this intersection, and of course that's the intersection where the new school right there is in. So you can see that blue is speed and red is obviously red light. And so there's the number. I'm not going to read all those numbers because on my screen I can't even hardly see them, but hopefully you guys can see them better, so you can kind of see how it's trending. As you know, we're back to, for the most part, the full program now. The construction has been completed there. The system was down for quite a while, but we're back up and running. So that's northbound. This is what southbound looks like. Same intersection. This is as you're leaving town. And you can see there July was a pretty bad year, or excuse me, pretty bad month. Apparently everybody was in a hurry to get out of Sherwood. Quite a spike there in speeding. And so that's always had a red light camera there. We added speed well, of course, with construction. So now probably more recently, and let me know if you have a question on any of these specific areas. So now we're going back northbound again, and we are at 12th and Sherwood. So you're northbound on 99W, and you're going through the 12th and Sherwood intersection, and that's always been our big red light intersection, unfortunately. And a lot of those red lights are people turning right against the red light, which is an unsafe turn, a very unsafe turn, because there's a crosswalk there. And ODOT, the way ODOT has the sequencing set up, the red light is I'm not going to use that term. So the crosswalk takes priority. So if somebody pushes the crosswalk signal and they want to cross that street, so they're crossing 12th and Sherwood from north to south or vice versa, it'll cause the red light, the right turn light, to go red. So some of those could potentially be folks turning against a red light when there's a pedestrian in the area. Don't know that, the data doesn't show that, but here's the point. People need to stop at that light. Obviously, some folks feel differently about right turn on red and different things like that, but my perspective from the very beginning, and I have never changed on this, is that we have these cameras to modify and change people's behavior. And if you're going to run a red light turning right, I have zero faith or confidence that you're not going to run a red light going straight or turning left. So running a red light is running a red light. So, and then of course you have the speed there. That intersection we've seen is got a lot of people that speed through it. Okay, so now same intersection. Now you're coming southbound. You're just kind of coming into the north part of town there at 12th and Sherwood. Numbers much lower, which is nice, but still people still speeding and still running lights. And then finally, the final approach is these are folks that are coming into town at Roy Rogers and they're getting to the light there at 99W. So they're going east and they're either going to turn left and go north on 99. They're going to go straight across 99 and stay on 12 and Sherwood, or they're going to turn right and go south on 99 through Sherwood. All three of those directions have cameras on them. And so these numbers could be from any one of those directions. No speed there, just red light. Okay, no questions? I don't see any hands on that. So that's photo. And lastly, we'll talk about kind of where we're at with staffing right now. So we are authorized at 31 FTE, and of course FTE, for those of you that don't know, means full-time equivalent. So that's a full-time person, and we're authorized at 31 mostly. I mean, we have Officer Kenny Line helping us with some of our photo enforcement stuff, so there could be a 0.5 in there or something, but basically 31. We currently have 28, so we are below staff right now. We've got 24 sworn. 2 of those 24 are in FTEP. One of them is a lateral and one of them is a recruit. Both of them are progressing very nicely, but they're still in training. 4 of those 28 are non-sworn, 3 administrative positions in the office and 1 community service officer. And we have 3 vacant positions, which rounds out, would take that 28 to 31. And so we are in recruitment to fill those 3 positions. We are wrapping up an entry-level recruitment right now with some candidates, and we have just posted, as you may have seen on Facebook, for a lateral position opening. So if you know anybody from a different agency or have any connections at different police agencies, this is your opportunity to tell them to come to work for the best police agency in the area. And I'm not looking at anybody in particular, Marie, so just saying. You know, he would save probably 10 minutes on his commute one way each day, but what, you know, hey, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, joking aside, help us spread the word if you have police officers that you know. And then we also we're down to 1 reserve police officer because we hired 2 of them. And so we have got a recruitment ongoing now to increase those numbers, reserve numbers too, or I should say as well. And then also we have 2 chaplains. So we have our standby longtime chaplain, Wilson, and we have brought on another chaplain to kind of support him and be a backup for times when he's out. And that's Chaplain Joel Smith. He's a local Sherwood clergy person. And so he's new to chaplaincy, and he's been around quite a bit and doing a great job and helping out. So that's kind of where we're at staffing wise right now. So that covers that hiring process update too. Like I said, on the agenda, I could have lumped all those together. Any final questions about anything on that?
I have a question, Chief, on the chaplains. So Joel Smith, does he serve multiple jurisdictions like Wilson does, or is he just a backup for Sherwood?
It's Joel White. Sorry, I don't know what.
Joel White.
I have Smith on the brain, which is not a bad thing.
I knew exactly who you were talking about.
Yeah. Well, so did I. No, he is just Sherwood PD. His interest was limited to just his hometown police department or his community police department, and so that's all he's doing.
Great.
Any other questions? Okay, I will close out of this then. And Mr. Chair, looks like my last thing is COVID update. So just wanted to make sure that everybody kind of knew where we were at as a department in the city right now. No new news. Obviously, the mask mandate is back. And so as a city, we are adhering to the mask mandate and requiring employees and visitors to mask up, except when they're in their private workspace. And from the facilities perspective, I just noticed today that there are some jurisdictions that are shutting facilities down. Sherwood is not and has not taken that step. So as of right now, facilities are still charging ahead. So that's where we're at with regard to that. So, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Chief. Okay, our next order of business is citizen comments. Do we have any citizen comments this evening?
We do not have any this evening.
Okay. Well, are there any last statements, comments, input, feedback from any of you board members? No. All right. I do have a question.
Mike has his hands.
I see hands. I apologize. Go ahead.
That's cool. Chief, this is just a reminder, because I don't want this to fall completely off your plate. I know you've got a lot on your plate right now, but when the timing is correct, I'd sure love to see the Citizens Academy, the Police Citizens Academy up and rolling again when it's the opportune time. Just don't want to let you forget that.
No, I appreciate the reminder. Citizens Academy, Coffee with the Cop, community events. There's a whole laundry list of things I would like to see back to normal. So obviously we monitor those that we control. We'll monitor and make the best and most informed decisions we can. But yeah, certainly COVID put a damper on that. We were excited and raring to go for session 2, and man, it's unfortunate. So, but thank you for the reminder. And then Ty's got something, and then I just wanted to say, Mike Meyer, it's good to see you now too as well.
Yeah, sorry, in the beginning, I'm an IT guy, so I mess with my own stuff. And I actually had to reload Teams while I was on the audio portion. So there you go.
Hey, real quick, and just before I got away, I wanted to just follow up with a couple things that the chief had talked about. And one was the MHRT team. Just so you guys know, and he alluded to the South Cities component that is going to be going into effect. You may have heard about it, and if you haven't, it's going to be a dedicated team with a clinician, with an officer from Tigard, Tualatin, and Sherwood on a rotating schedule. So this is a brand new pilot program for the South Cities, but we see such value in a clinician and a police officer teamed up for all the behavioral calls that we are getting down here. And hopefully our goal is probably by October 1st for that to be in place. Our position, or our opening for that position, closes tomorrow, so we'll have an officer selected for that. I know Tigard and Tualatin already have officers selected, and we are raring to go, and we're excited about, I think, the positive impact we're going to be making in all of our communities collectively, because as you know, we have lines that separate the cities, but we don't have lines when it comes to these kind of activities. They just go where they're going to go, and we're going to respond. So our primary focus for this team will be just the South Cities. Obviously, if there's a need somewhere north, we will go in those emergency situations, but I want to just make sure that you guys knew that was coming. And the other thing we talked about a little bit was the hiring. We're going to be, just so you know, we're going to be on a continuous hiring spree because we have known retirements coming up in the next year. And so we're going to be continually trying to find good, and hopefully, our goal is to find some really good laterals, but that's kind of difficult to do. But we will be hiring. We're going to be training, and so again, get the word out there if you know people that have an interest in law enforcement or are looking to come here, because and I know we kind of beat this drum a lot, that it's just not we hire you on Friday and you start on Monday. You're almost a year into this process before we see you on the road solo and a part of the community and doing the job. So it takes a lot of time. It's a big investment on our end, and it's an investment in from the community with these officers. So I think that's important. And my final pitch is lock your doors. Spread the word. We sent some posts out there about the prolific car thieves out there, not only stealing your cars, but just going through unlocked doors. We have video upon video of people out there just walking through neighborhoods, just lifting handles and taking what they can. And unfortunately, and I don't know, the word is creep that I've been hearing, and it's true. The creep from Portland is here. I mean, they're testing the waters out here in Washington County and seeing what they can get away with. So we're trying to spread that word out there. So if you can help us with that, that would be great. It just seems like every day we're getting reports of theft from vehicles out there, and so I think that's it on my list. Unless you had anything for me.
I've just got one last question statement, if you, and this is again, if no one else has anything to add or other comments. I just wanted to say, in talking to a lot of soccer moms and dads, they're asking me about the police's role with regards to the schools and fallout from the mask mandate and how the police here respond. We're seeing in other cities and states how the sheriffs and police are having to get involved in certain situations. So just wanting to know if there is a sort of either a plan moving forward or just to let the community know sort of how police see their role in all this. And that could be either you, Ty, or Chief.
The chief wasn't turning his mute off, but it looks like he did now. Go ahead.
Well, you're more than welcome to take it unless you want me to.
Either way, go ahead.
Go
I
for
think
it,
you responded to some of those emails.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up, Chair, because that's obviously a very timely and relevant topic. We were having conversations, in fact, today. So Ty is taking the lead on that. He oversees our what I refer to as our school policing, which is kind of a formal term, but he oversees the school resource officer program and interactions and collaboration with the school district. And the first message I want folks to hear, and I hope people watch this, if not, you all can spread the word, is that there is in fact very good, very strong collaboration between your police department and your school district. And we are on the very same page. And our number one priority together is to make sure that Sherwood's kiddos and students are safe. They feel safe and they are actually safe. And that our schools are safe places for the kids to go. We take that very seriously. I just, again, another strong part of my history. I spent 4 years as a school resource officer. I supervised school resource officers, and this is a big deal to me. And so we are very committed to that. Superintendent Cordy has already reached out to us about the ongoing issues, I guess, for lack of a better term. The school district, your school district, is all over this, and we are working together and we'll have a plan in place. And it's not like, oh, we've got to scramble and put together a fancy plan. No, there's no scrambling. We'll formalize what we've already, kind of what we've done before. And I can assure you that the first days of school will be safe, and we'll be ready for whatever. Now that said, I just lost my train of thought. That said, we're going to have presence as much as we can at every school, and our role is to keep the peace, right? So if people have an opinion, that's fine. You can have an opinion. You're more than welcome to that. We all have an opinion, but I'm not interested in opinions. I'm interested in making sure that everybody behaves themselves and the schools are safe, the school grounds are safe, the kids feel safe, and it's a peaceful experience. So that's what our role is going to be. And as I said, we're partnering with the school district very closely. And so I will leave it at that. Ty, feel free to add anything you want to, but as I said, Ty is I'm involved, but really Ty is taking the lead on this because this falls under his purview.
No, I just echo what the chief said, and just collaborating with the school district and just ensuring that at the end of the day that the kids are safe. You all know that we don't have enough resources to go to all the schools simultaneously, but we're going to make our best effort to be there and be present and just balance that out with what comes up. And obviously we're hoping that we have a contingency plan that will resolve any issues that may potentially arise.
And we still have just one SRO in Sherwood, or is there two now?
Well, we have no SROs dedicated at the moment.
Okay.
Now,
got it.
To clarify, we have two vacancies per se for SRO. It just, as the chief said, we kind of fall back on this COVID thing, and that's the reality of that. We didn't have school. We had a transition of our last SRO. So we are now trying to have those discussions on what and how that's going to look like moving forward. So hopefully we will have some of those positions in place here soon.
And would that change the full-time, the FTE? It would stay 31, you would just transition one position over to SRO? Okay.
So that's the balancing act, and that's what we juggle with continuously. And that's kind of why I brought up we're going to be continually hiring, is because because our first priority is obviously covering the road and responding to calls for service, and also addressing the concerns of the SRO positions, the MHRT team, detectives, all these things that are a draw, and always finding that balance is difficult. And we found out last year, not to get off course here, but even with new recruits, I think, and maybe the chief can correct me on that, but I think we had a couple of our recruits during class, they were stopped midstream in their classes because of a COVID outbreak. And so it really extended our recruiting and recruits training. So we're trying to catch up.
Yep.
And I think, it's going to be 2-3 years down the road for us to really probably be up and running and stable.
Got it. Greg was an SRO. That's the reason I asked. I have a soft spot in my heart for SROs.
Yeah, and just to clarify, we have 2 budgeted positions for SROs. So this was a priority of council and the budget committee, and it was a part of our staffing plan. And so those positions have been funded, but you can't always control who decides it's time to go to a different agency, or who decides it's time to move their family to another state. It just happens. And so, yeah. So anyway, but the resources have been committed, and we are committed as an agency. We understand the value. Obviously, I already told you about myself. Ty also spent some years as an SRO. So you've got 2 strong believers in the program, and we're going to get that taken care of. So.
Well,
Yeah.
Chief, just to clarify on the 2 funded SRO positions, currently though, the school district has authorized us for 1, and we've been in conversations with them for the 2nd. And as of like a year and a half ago, they weren't ready to move forward with the 2nd, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
And Marie, just to circle back around on that, we are committed to getting an SRO in there. It's just who and how fast we can make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. I'm glad that it isn't like other agencies who've decided that SROs aren't an important part of this, of the keeping the kiddos safe. So I'm grateful that we're still knowing how important it is.
We have never heard that message locally.
No.
We've never heard that message from the school district. And more importantly, we continually hear from members of the community how much they value school resource officers and how they'd like to see more. So that's where we're at.
That's good. They're fighting it in Beaverton too. So anyway, we could go on this topic for hours because I'll get super nerdy about SRO. So we'll stop it and let people go, about their evenings.
I bet I would get nerdier than you.
I bet you and I could spend hours in the drudges of SRO community resourcing. So anyway, I'll leave it alone.
Well, thank you both for those comments, Chief and Ty, and thank you, Marie, for your passion. And yeah, this is definitely a city where SROs are highly valued, and it's one of the things I think that makes Sherwood so special. But with that said, if there are no other comments, input from any of you board members, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Wonderful. All right. Well, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much for your time, and we will see you next month.